Vampires, then, are like generals with expendable troops. They act like the military, and they have another power, which is one that the military has dreamed of having for centuries, which is the ability to control the weather. This ability is limited with vampires, but sometimes the perception of possessing power is just as important as the actual power. One example of this is in dealing with consumers. The product on the left could be considered an example of making a sacrifice to a deity, in the form of money in this case, in return for supernatural aid, which would be control over the weather, or as labeled here, the climate. Certainly an effective way to ensure brand loyalty, because in order to be certain that the climate has changed, we usually define climate as 30-year normals. So to measure climate, you need 30 years of data to set it apart from just weather. Therefore, even if this product did change the climate, it would take 30 years to find out. Whether it does change the climate is doubtful. It's a partial truth because water has very high specific heat. Every substance takes a different amount of heat to raise its temperature by the same amount. Specific heat is the amount of energy you have to put into something to raise its temperature by 1 degree Celsius for 1 gram of substance. Water has the most resistance to being heated of any common substance. It's very difficult to change its temperature. If you compare water to ethyl alcohol, put it on a pot, on a stove, equal volumes of each, the ethyl alcohol will warm up and boil away before the water is even completely warmed. You could claim that by replacing the shampoo bottle's contents, which would start out as air, with water, that you are in essence imparting a sort of climate control to the inside of the shampoo bottle, because you're making it more difficult to change the internal temperature. However, you're not really influencing the climate outside at all. The other stabilizing influence on the Earth that makes it resistant to change is carbon dioxide. Ironically, this is something in human blood that's a buffer. That is, it makes human blood more resistant to changes in acidity or alkalinity than it otherwise would be. So it stabilizes your blood, which might be good for a vampire in that you could be kept alive long enough so that it could feed. And it's also what mosquitoes use to track you. Carbon dioxide also stabilizes the Earth in other ways. Aside from making you available as mosquito food, it's the source of energy for plants. Plants take it in and use it to make their own sugars with. It's what they build themselves out of. Carbon dioxide and water, put together in the presence of sunlight, make sugar and build plant tissues. So on a very sunny day, the plant will take in some sunlight and put that into energy storage in its own tissues. So that sunlight won't be available to heat the Earth during the hottest part of the day, which will regulate the extremes of temperature to some degree. Also, plants slow down the rate at which water hits the Earth. They interfere with the path of raindrops on their way to the ground, so the raindrops don't splash and make the soil a surface that sheds rain easily. If you have an area with lots of grass and trees on it, the water will be slowed down and infiltrate more completely into the soil so that it won't run off. You won't have as much flooding. Also, that water will be available later on to help the plant grow and to be put back out into the atmosphere on hot, dry days. Plants, of course, also provide shade, so they regulate temperature all over the planet wherever they're present. And they're more of a stabilizing influence on the climate than we might normally think, because carbon dioxide is the source of all plant growth, and it's currently less than half as plentiful as it should be for plants to grow their best. Nevertheless, carbon dioxide is painted as a villain. The sources of all things that give life, water, carbon dioxide, and sunlight, are the enemies of vampires. Vampires might be thought of as Shakespeare's green-eyed monster that mocks the meat it feeds on. They're not living entities, and yet they're dependent on the processes of life for their existence, because they need humans to imagine them, and humans need food, which comes from plants. Nevertheless, there's this villainization of carbon dioxide by institutions for the purpose of selling people products. In the second case, the product being a non-carbonated drink. It's billed as clean energy for a thirsty world, and it's billed as clean because there's no additional carbon dioxide put into the drink to make fizz. However, there is still carbon in the drink because it's in the form of sugar, which was made by plants. Plants capture carbon dioxide and put it into storage. Animals, on the other hand, metabolize carbon compounds, and exhale the carbon dioxide again to be used by the plants. So there's no such thing as clean energy in terms of energy that does not release carbon dioxide. A living thing cannot be clean in the sense defined by the ad. Also, it's a strange way of keeping carbon dioxide out of the biosphere if that's what you think of as clean, because the only clean environment as defined by the pop company would be inside the can. There's no carbon dioxide added, but once you open the can to drink it, you're destroying the pristine environment inside the can. A more sensible way, if one thought of restricting carbon dioxide supply for the good of the environment outside the can, would be to carbonate the drink and then never open it, which makes another way of selling the product by guilt, because you could sequester carbon by never opening the can and buying the product nevertheless. This idea of consumer product containers as miniature ideal worlds or Pandora's boxes is something that Steve Vernon also plays with in his Evolve 2 story, The Faith of Burning Glass, from the bottom of page 173 to the top of page 174.